Okay. All right. We're live. John, thank you so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate this, man. Um, so we have an agenda written down on kind of some topics to hit on here. Now, I have a feeling that a lot of it is they're big topics. So we're gonna roughly touch on a lot of it, and then we'll probably have to do some other ones down the road and uh, and elaborate more. So, anyways, to start off, John, introduce yourself a little bit if you can, and give us a little bit about your fishing background and just a little bit of all that, and kind of let people know who you are.
Well, hi, John from Hawaii. Been fishing pretty much all my life here. As far as I think what the viewers might be interested in from the boat side, I've been on the boat since about 12, 13 years old. Around that same time is when I, got into making lures as well. I still continue to fish every chance I get, even if it's in a hotel pond. I'm on the shore, walking the reef, on the boat, deep dropping, trolling, whatever. If it has fins, I'm chasing it. So it's I don't know. Fishing has been my life for as long as I can remember. It's been a double-edged sword, so to speak, as far as during high school times and things like that. It's I was that kid drawing fish in boats on every single piece of paper, and it's been a wild road to get to where I am now. It's interesting ups and downs, but I wouldn't have changed a thing.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, in terms of lore making, uh, where did that? How did that come about? And some of your early influences, mentors, things of that nature. Um, what got you to where you're at to now? How did you fall into that lore making aspect?
Basically, my dad. It, when he came home with his first boat, it was he was all in. And during that time frame, it was there was no internet, unfortunately. It was the game of knock on somebody's door if you had to look for information, or you're in Walden books looking for information. But through him, his pursuit, he ended up buying a lathe, or not even a lathe, rather. It was we made all the lures back then on a hand drill. But his pursuit of wanting to get better, all that kind of stuff, kind of led down a pathway of introductions to different peoples, other lure makers, things like that. One of my biggest influences early on was my neighbor, who when my dad first came up with the boat, he introduced himself and came over with a milk crate full of lures, gifting to us. And out of all of those lures, there was one that kind of stuck out for me, and it was an old Gary Eoff pair. And that I vividly remember, staring at that thing for days and days and days, just mesmerized. Uh, did you lose me? You got me?
Uh oh. Hey, we lost you there for a second, John.
Oh, sorry about that. You got me now?
Yeah. Sorry, dude. That was weird. That thing just froze up. Go ahead.
No, sorry. Yeah, no. So like I was saying, it was
So you were
for me.
saying there was one lure that was sticking out for you. That was right when I lost you.
Oh, that lure was a small little Gary Eoff pair. To which I still have, and that thing, the colors, the artistry, the craftsmanship was, I think, was were the hallmarks that kind of stuck with me. And wanted, led down to where I am now. Wanting to figure out how that was made. What was it that uh, what aspect of it that made it look the way it did. Shine the way it did, all that kind of stuff. Um, from there, it was having a father that allowed me to do crazy stuff in the garage. Pour resin, spill resin. You know, yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things. I think it kind of came naturally, where just that creative mindset, wanting to figure out things, taking it down to the nuts and bolts of things. From that point on, it's been a nonstop ride of trying to continually learn. Even to this day, I still consider myself a student in all regards. Um, over the years, I've been very fortunate to meet and work with a lot of other lure makers. It's Some of it has been just dumb luck as far as meeting them. Others, I've been very fortunate to have been introduced to, and to this day, I still love to work with some of the greats out there. You know, uh, Gary Eoff, Joe Yee, Koyanagi. The first guy I got to work with was Dennis Odagiri. He, in my mind at least, uh, he is considered the grandfather of the modern fish head. The fish head insert. Um, Guys like him have been an inspiration. Basically, every guy that's put a lure out there has been inspiration for me. Um, I've collected them for years. I've gone through way too many of them. Uh, I don't have enough time to ever run, all of them. But they every single lure has influenced me in some way, shape, or form. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's cool, and I guess that what kind of comes to my mind is that the general progression um, of lure making, right, would be that you would start with just your regular type of a lure head or something like that, and just kind of follow suit. And like, there's only so many shapes of lures that can be made, right? Like you have your plungers, your tubes, so there's only so much in that regard. But you kind of went a different route, especially with your baits are very unique. I mean, they look like they look real, they look like a fish. So um, where did that how did that come into play? Like, where did you think, okay, I'm gonna make an aku, or I'm gonna make an opelu, or I'm gonna make flying fish or whatever? How did you kind of think? Because that's pretty outside the box, man. I mean, from what there's guys that had done fish inserts and things of similar nature, but not what you started coming out with. So yeah, what sort of was that? Where'd that come from? How did that just vision pop in there?
Science. I mean, when I say that, I mean it kind of breaking it down, looking at it from a trying as best as possible to look at it from an objective point of view. Looking at what they eat, checking the gut content, seeing what the fish are eating. It's my belief that their fish are simply complex or complexly simple. They're either breeding or they're feeding. And if you understand that, it's like I said, looking at the gut content, seeing what they're eating. They're not eating pieces of plastic for the most part. There are certain ones that certain fishes that I think they're targeting on, especially for us in Hawaii. We have flying fish. We have all the small tunas. We have the opelus, the mackerels, things of that nature and stuff like that. And once you start to understand their food source, to me at least, it's just a it was kind of a common sense kind of thing to try and replicate what they're eating. You know, to my earlier comment about, you know, looking at every other lure maker, it's always been from a kid. I would always wonder why this color, why this shape, why this insert, why this size. And I guess for me, it just seemed like a common sense thing. If you could make something that looked realistic, you know, it would that would be the ticket. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess uh, when you think about it, obviously what these animals are eating that's what you want your stuff to look like. So, but figuring out how to do it's a whole different story. And yeah, I think you nailed it. So, um, that's really cool, man. And I guess, through time, your bait sort of evolved. Was the Aku the first one you made, or was there like an Opelu you made or something? Like, how did it sort of evolve into, then the Shibis and the Akus and the Malolas, everything? Where, like, was there a general progression, or you said, okay, I'm going to just start with this mold or whatever, and then kind of roll from there?
Well, that's a loaded question, but I think like every other lure maker in Hawaii, we have, we take influence off of other guys, and it starts and it progresses from there. The biggest change, I think, at least from the Hawaii perspective, is the availability of materials. Back in the day, there was basically one source where you could get your resin from, and only one type of resin you could get. With the advent of the internet, ideas are now worldwide. They're not. They're it's Everything is available to everybody. Whether it's ideas, materials, all that kind of stuff. And so, like everything else, I think it naturally progresses. For me, the only constant has been change. As far as theories, again, back to materials. I think for me that was the biggest uh, game changer, so to speak, uh, as far as what can be done, and what has been done. For Hawaii at least, shipping being the bane, and still to this day the hiccup for a lot of us. Be it availability or cost.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, yeah, it's just like as materials progressed, we've seen it in so many different ways. It's the capabilities have progressed as well. And that's kind of also what we've seen with your bait too, is that there's been a progression. And there's certain ones with different color patterns and
So,
yeah,
sorry. Back to your original question, the where it started, as far as the fish head side,
yeah,
was this one. This was one of my first, or the first publicly released fish head style that I put out. From there, you know, uh, we started running it. I started working, and it just made sense to keep going. And like I said, looking at what they're feeding on, at least locally, it went from there to the Opelu, to the flying fish, and then to the Aku. It's like I said, the only constant has changed, and my mindset has changed drastically through the years with the help of all the fishermen out there that are running them. The feedback coming back. Um, the biggest jump for me from going from this to this was for me at least, it was the size difference.
yeah,
For us, would be considered a 12-inch bait. Not too many guys on Oahu anyway are going to be running 12-inch. Everything is more in the 7-9 inch range. And credit to guys like Brett Fay. I think he was one of the first guys to put Flashaboo on the Aku and make it work. You know,
yeah,
uh, that opened, and it opened up the mind, so to speak, and to the point where, you know, you look at how different people fish, what they're fishing for, um, all that kind of stuff. You know, it's Pandora's box.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's where I saw your bait first was on the back of the humdinger with Brett. He's just a couple boats down from me, and he was just kept getting smashed by some lure, and he kept was saying Niiyama, and I was like, what is this, man? So I walked down to his boat and was like, okay, man, what's going on here? And he had a few of your baits, and they looked like they'd been dragged down the highway for about 4 hours. So, so that's where I saw it, and he really he figured out kind of how to make those work for at least here in Kona, and he was doing phenomenal on them. And he had one of the red ones too. I remember too. I saw that was like a red upelu as well, and different ones. But yeah, it's cool to see, that. I mean, it's like lure makers and fishermen, like we need each other. So
Oh yeah, it's a
it's
two-way street. You know, it's
yeah,
my success has been, as it's been, from guys like you. You know, it doesn't work without guys pulling it. You know, it's teamwork makes the dream work. You know.
yeah. It goes the same way. I mean, the fishermen, we can't catch what we're catching without the help of lure makers, and you guys putting in the time and coming up with these cool baits and stuff. So, yeah, it's awesome, man. But that's really, it's interesting to see you kind of started with a ballyhoo, because that is just like the most common thing that people like to pull, and then you progress from that. I mean, look, only delve into too much in terms of like the actual design, whatever you want to talk about. But I noticed, it's not just a circle like most bullets have been made. Anyone that has an aku, either size, or even the ballyhoos. I actually have a ballyhoo right here. Um, they it has a unique design to it, and obviously that's not by an accident. There's a reasoning behind it, and I videoed these things with GoPros because I was like, we can only see so much from up on the surface, right? And I can see it fluttering and I can see its back, but I couldn't really tell exactly what it looked like. So I did pull it in and GoPro at one time, and I mean, it runs straight. I mean, it runs like a bait. It's not going like this. It's not, it's running like a fish, and I'm assuming that had a lot to do with how the design and how you've kind of created it that way, because there's other people that have attempted to do it, and they don't run as good as yours are. So, that's interesting. I just, I don't know how much you want to dive into that at all, because that's kind of secret info, but, was that just kind of, was that all planned? Did you say, look, this is how I'm going to design this, and this is how it's going to run? Or did you just kind of happen on it and it started working and you just kind of rolled with that?
I think it's a combination of dumb luck and science, to
Uh-huh.
the point of continuing to try to refine it. Like you said earlier on, some of my earliest models didn't even have weights in it, to the point where they would, belly flop, run on the side. And it's due to, just watching them, seeing how they react, seeing how the fish react, more importantly, getting feedback from guys like you. I've been able to continually redesign things, tweak things, add things. But back again to my comment of trying to look at it from the fish's perspective. There's very few symmetrically tubular fish out there. Every fish is I haven't seen a perfectly round fish, so to speak, out there. Everything is kind of flat sided, or not perfectly round. And I think that's, at least for me, I try to not ignore but retrain the brain as far as what things should be. As far as what every other lure maker has told me before, it has to be perfectly round. It has to be cut on a lathe. It has to be weighted this way, that way, all that kind of stuff. I kind of threw all that stuff out the window and, started from scratch.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's kind of a work in progress. I don't think there's necessarily a perfect lure or bait out there. I think there's improvement that can be made on every regard.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's cool that, thinking outside the box creates things that are different, and sometimes you fail, and sometimes you do really well. And I, applaud guys doing that, thinking outside the box in our industry, because it's not easy to do. And there's a lot of people, it's a lot easier to think, well, we know this is proven, we know this works, so we're going to stick with our guns and just do this. But we need people that think outside the box, come up with different ideas. And I mean, I'm sure you can attest to the fact that you're going to fail a lot, like a shit ton. You're going to fail, you're going to fail, but then you're going to come up with something that is different, and it's going to, and I mean, that's what we need in the industry, right? So it doesn't grow stagnant, So I think it's cool.
I fail daily. It's I look at it like a broken clock. I'm right at least twice a day.
Same here, man. Yeah.
But no, it's to your point. It is failing. I think I have more failures than successes at this point as far as lures go. It's not easy, but to your point, I think fortune favors the bold at times.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have to, if you want the same results as somebody else, then yeah, mimic them. I'm just not looking for the same results as the crowd, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's great, man. So, I think that's a good message to anybody out there that's getting into lure making or is a lure maker and wants to try to do something different or whatever in any sort of thing. It's like, trying making that leap to try something a little bit different. And, in our industry, it can really help bring things up to the next level. And, it's a perfect example of what came, out of your baits. And, there's now this like fish head revolution that came on for a little while and as well. And so, it's cool to see. As a fisherman, I love it because I just want to see our sport progress. And so it's nice. And I think, for people out there that are nervous about doing something different in terms of making something different or trying a new way of doing it, whatever. And like, it's okay to fail. And you're going to get to that point where you may come up with something that's going to help all of us just be better fishermen. So I think that's really cool. And that's probably a good message to get, out there to people that might be just jumping into it or whatever. Cool. So, well, let's talk a little bit about, your baits and running them. And because they're different, they kind of want to be run a little bit differently. And, we talked briefly, John, yesterday about like, that's a hard question to answer because there's 100 different ways, depending on your rigger setup, depending on their boat weight, depending on sea conditions. There's not an answer to this, a straightforward answer to say, hey, this is how you run this lure. This is how it has to be done. So, I guess with whatever we say here for the audience out there, for anyone watching this, do what works for you with these lures, and experiment and find how it gets bit for you. But we'll kind of talk in terms of what we've had success with. And John, you can talk in terms of like what you've learned from customers as well, what they've had success with. In my experience with this lure, I do generally actually run it kind of on the back of the wave. So for people who are unaware, like if this is your boat wake, right, and this is a pressure wave off the back of your boat, and a lot of lures like to run kind of right at that top part of it, so they're really plowing and pushing down. I actually will run this a little bit off the back, or in the hole in here. And the reason being that we want this lure really not not to pop as much as like a regular bullet. You're not looking for it to come up and dish rag and do all kinds of stuff like that. It really should be getting into the water from, again, this is my opinion, but it should be getting in that water and really kind of getting down there and looking like a fish paddling, and you'll get a little black water ruffle ripple, but you know, you don't want it spending too much time on the surface, because I think what we were figuring out was when it comes up on the surface to splash, it tends to roll a little bit on its side, which probably doesn't make a difference because I've pulled ballyhoos that run on its side a lot and they get slammed. But I think, you know, for the majority of people that are pulling them, and from what I've had my experience with them, is on the back of the wave and kind of keeping it in the water, and adjusting it so that you get that real good wiggle and it's down there, and it will run a little bit deeper too. John, what are your thoughts? How do you like to see your bait run when you're out fishing? What do you like to do with the different ones? Give us some ideas on that.
Well, it's to your point. That's a loaded question. I've had feedback, across the board. Running it short, running it long. Front of the wave, back of the wave. To your point, in the hole, it's guys have been getting lucky in all positions, and to your earlier point, it's there's so many different variables that go with that. If you're running it off the tip, off the rig, or off a tagline, the type of leader you're using, your type of hook set, how you're skirting material, all that kind of stuff, I think comes into play to a certain extent and can affect not the outcome, but how it looks in the water. And it's honestly, dude, that's a very interesting question. I'm still trying to figure out, to try and pinpoint, and so that we can, the entire industry can replicate it, so to speak. And I don't think there's anyone out there, myself included, that has it truly dialed in quite yet. I think there's guys who have seen a lot of consistent success with different hook sets, different rigging materials, stuff like that. For me, what I found is as long as, like, to your point, it's not flip flopping all over in the back and tangling on itself. They tend to get bit. I mean, put yourself in the right positions, on the right grounds. If the fish are there, I think, you stand a decent chance at that point. But as far as how I like to run it, I do the crazy, stupid stuff. In the sense that, thankfully, if I lose it, I can, I know a guy, so it's I'll try the stupid stuff, bordering on somewhat dangerous at times, for the aku, I think we found that for a lot of guys, they're having a lot of success with a single hook rig. The debate is always there, run it up, run it down, to each their own, even down to which way the leader coil is. Is it up, is it down? How guys are pegging it, whether it be with toothpicks and or rubber stoppers. For me, I like a softer leader. Some guys like the hard leaders, and that's, I think that's a personal preference at times. When it comes to fluorocarbon, non-fluorocarbon, it's I've caught fish on both, I've lost fish on both, and so it's my mind still hasn't been made up on that aspect. When you start talking about other baits, smaller baits and stuff like that, I'll go to a small single hook, or a big double hook, a claw type Yozuri double hook. Down to a little bit of experimental stuff too, which is, again, I'm not advocating that everybody should try this, because it does border on the dangerous and the if you're playing by IGFA rules and all that kind of stuff, it's a different ball game. But as far as the flying fish, uh, this guy here, what I've been doing is this, and running a trailer, uh, a small lure behind that. So effectively off of one rod, we're running two lures, and yes, it works. But at the same time, again, you got to take the safety aspect of it into concern. Especially when leadering fish and stuff like that. If all that kind of stuff, and if you're in a tournament or not, and what the rules and regulations are. But no, it's like I said, it's just trying new things. I don't necessarily have a set way of rigging or how I like to rig. I think. Uh, oh, did we lose him?
Yeah, it looks like he disappeared. Just go ahead and keep on talking.
Okay. No, yeah, I think it's you got to kind of just find what works for you on your boat and your boat and crew. The one thing I've learned through the years, I've been very fortunate to fish with a lot of different guys, and I think from my standpoint, the one commonality is that not one of them is doing it exactly the same. Everybody's doing things just a little bit different. Everybody has their own theory, their own perspective, and it's for the most part, it, I it works for everybody. It's you got to just be out there.
Yep. Here, Chris is calling. Hey, what's up? I got him. Yeah, I'm good. Okay. All right. Well, keep on trying. Yep, we're good. Yep. No worries, man. We got your back. All right, John. Yeah. So, I mean, even like for us, just to kind of go to your point, I mean, I'm not going to speak from, the fisherman's standpoint to the same length that you and Chris are, because obviously I don't have as much experience as you guys. But what we do for us is same thing. We have our ways of doing things, but and we have our standards, but we're even open about that. Everyone's methods of how they do things is different. For example, even like our stiff rigs. I know like Marlon Parker, who's a captain that you'd like to follow, right? That he's one of the most well-known captains out there. He builds his rigs different than we do. He doesn't heat shrink the whole thing. We on our stiff rigs, on our big Marlin lures, we heat shrink the whole thing. And yeah, you can toy around with hook up and hook down, and some lures you can probably get away with both, and some there might be more preferential of what you do, but there are different ways of doing things, and that's okay. I mean, everyone's got their own method, and we have reasons why we do things the way we do, and you have reasons why you do things that you do. Yeah, you're a more dangerous man, as you per se. But yeah. So I think that's really good to say all that. I think it's spot on. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. So now that Chris isn't here jabbering, let's talk about, we were talking about your history. When you and I first connected, well, the first time I remember you were auctioning off lures on eBay. That's the first time. That was like, what, 7-8 years ago? I don't even know, man.
At least, yeah.
It's been a long time. And then that was the first time I recognized your lures, and I thought they're definitely different, and they had a different look to them. And I was like, okay, well, I took notice or whatever, and then I didn't hear your name or anything until Stephen Whiteson gave me a call one day. It was like, hey, we were talking just general business stuff. We were talking about something else. He's probably called me on behalf of you, but we were talking about other things. And then he's like, hey, you want you want to check out these new lures we got from John Niiyama. He's a friend of mine, and yeah, just think maybe this would fit your storefront. And again, this is I think I was maybe still doing eBay stuff myself at that time when the company was starting. Let's talk about the shift in just like, I guess you almost say our lives, because things have been so different since that day. You were just kind of getting going, right? Like eBay was where you started at. And of course you're probably doing some things locally and whatever, but like your business is so different from when it used to be. I mean, from even just how what lures you had, you didn't have the Aku, didn't exist back then. You talked about where you started with the ballyhoo. I remember you had these, it's not the same version that you produce anymore, but like I remember seeing these big Opelu lures, like it was like a 9-inch plus size around there. Maybe some smaller ones, but they all look different. And talk about like that shift and how things have transpired over the years to like where you are now. What's that been like for you?
Well, it's been and still is a wild ride, you know.
Yeah.
Going back to your comment of eBay, you know, even prior to that, it's one of the biggest reasons I'm actually doing this full time at this point is due to places like Craigslist and eBay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I met a local charter boat owner here, you know, by the name of Glenn Ueda, who he bought a crazy amount of lures off of me, you know, not even knowing me, just I think recognizing that they were different, you know, and that kind of light bulb moment for me where it's it's this can be more than just a side hobby of things. Dawned on me to the point where, you know, it was through him I got to meet Joey, you know, and that whole thing came about, you know. Prior to that, I got to do a little bit of collaboration with Dennis Odagiri,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you know, to your point about where it started, how it's progressing, you know, it's in working with those guys, learning from them, being able to throw things back and forth, and you know, look at it from a different point of view, you know. And that's been the best part about all of this, you know. Going from you know, Craigslist to where we are now, you know. um, I don't know. I'm just I honestly I pinch myself almost every day. You know, it's been a dream come true since you know, if I told myself as a kid I'd be here, I wouldn't have believed you. You know, but um, super grateful. You know, for guys like you. You know, to your question or to your comment rather of doing things locally. You know, unfortunately, I mean, there's you know, I was turned down by more people than not, you know, as far as trying to get into the local distribution and stuff like that, you know. And it's just, you know, it's lessons learned about, you know, human nature, I guess, you know, ego, envy, greed, pride, what have you. You know, it's sometimes that gets in the way of progression, you know. And to the point where you know, you bring up Whiteson. You know, I met Whiteson through David Finkelstein. You know, and that was through eBay. You know, and selling, you know, not only my lures but Joey lures. You know, thankfully, and it's just like I said, I pinch myself every day to see how the dots have connected over time, and you know, to see businesses like yours grow. You know, from literally nothing to where you are now. You know, and I think it speaks a lot to, you know, your nature as well as just the nature of the industry as well, being able to change a perspective, so to speak, you know, and rewrite the rules, you know. What was status quo is no longer, you know. Certain things remain, certain things have drastically changed. And I think it's just like I said, it's been one long wild ride, and I don't foresee it getting any smoother. And I think that's a good thing from my perspective. I don't like things being stagnant. I think there's always again the one constant for me has been change.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to progress and hopefully make things better.
Yeah.
Hey,
Wait, sorry guys.
We're good.
You had no interruption while I was gone there?
Yeah, no, we're good, man. I'm surprised in Tornado Valley, I wasn't the one who conked out of there.
Dude, I don't know what is going on over here. Spectrum is having like issues with the internet, but I'm glad it kept going with you guys. So I was like, oh, because it just erased, and then I rebooted and all kinds. I was like, oh man, and I would miss probably one of the best parts of the discussion. So I'm gonna have to go back and watch it. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead, guys. Where are we at?
Well, we're talking about just the progression of like where he was from. I just kind of went back to some of the earlier conversation about his lures and where they were from where he started to where we are now. We just got into a little discussion about how it's been on that wild ride for John. Because I mean, kind of continue that conversation, John. I mean, your business and our business pretty much grew at the same time. We worked together exclusively for a while. And I mean, I would say this at the end, but I mean, one of the reasons that we are successful to this day and what we do have is because of your help, not just carrying your product and how, I mean, it was not that hard to get this thing started at first. It really wasn't that hard. When the internet, the way it works now is you just throw out whatever shit you want to throw out on the wall. And then if someone's looking for that, they'll find it. And maybe, I did some things a little bit differently when I started this company, but I remember we had some pretty hard to find things when I first started. And actually Moist Lures was, I don't know what this whole situation was, but when we started carrying Moist Lures, our Facebook account just grew organically because people were looking for Moist Lures and they were on there. And so then kind of transition to what we're talking about, like you and I grew our businesses together. And one of the main reasons why we grew as quickly as we did at first, and I would not say that we necessarily blew up overnight or anything like that, like we didn't, but your products kind of did blow up overnight. And it just sort of happened that we were very fortunate that we were carrying them. And then a guy like I said, Stephen Whiteson gives me a blind call. I'd never talked to the guy before. And I said, yeah, no, we'll try him out. I did more than try him out after that. We worked together pretty tightly after that. And then, I think something that I'll specifically say but even that we've tried to do is doing things a little bit differently. When you do something a little bit differently and you bring something different to the table, it catches the eyes of other people. Unless you do a really crappy job of that. But I would say that your product spoke for itself, but it wasn't that they just look cool. I mean, they were catching fish at the same time, right? And when your stuff was really blowing up, your Aku was winning tournaments like the Big Rock and doing things. I mean, like lots of large fish were being caught. And it all just kind of happened at the same time. So anyway, to kind of go back to what I was going to say as well, but with our business, like it wasn't just your product. You helped us get Joe Yee Lures. That was you. You helped me with a lot of things. You slapped me upside the head a few times when I need to hear some things. And I'd say that actually was a good thing for not just me, but the company. You've been always very helpful. So, I mean, I don't know, like you and I have we have a unique relationship in that fact. And I'm, that's why I want to talk about that conversation is because like, I've always just been to do what you've done in that short period of time is what all these guys strive for, like to get that notoriety and that recognition. And that's not to like just prop you up. It's just like, I mean, one of the reasons why that happened is because you did something different. And that's, and like, as Chris was saying, we want to progress this industry. One of the things that, you know, as a lure specialty company for all over these years, that, you know, what GZ wants to see is like coming up with your own ideas and your own concepts and creativity. And even if it's just like the design and the look of your lures. Like a guy that's kind of blowing up right now is Lee Simmons. He makes just his lures look different. You can just spot his lures from just looking at them. If you've seen them, you know what it is. It's his eyes. It's his, even the design, the shape. I mean, yeah, scoop face is a scoop face for the most part. You got taper that can differ slightly, but like his flyers are very distinguishable. His designs and his looks, they all look different. Like that's something that even as a lure maker, that I would encourage is you got to do something different, which is what you did. And that helped tremendously. It wasn't just that you caught fish too. It was that your stuff is different. Like it was eye catching. So it's just been cool to watch all that. Anyway, that's just that part of the conversation that I wanted to get into.
No, it's like I've always told you, it's a two-way street. You know, I wouldn't be here without you guys. You know, specifically you, Cole. You know, you took the gamble on me early on. You know, where like I said, even some of the local guys wouldn't take that gamble. You know, for whatever reason it may be, and it just whether it's fate or what have you. You know, we're here now. You know, to your comment about guys like Lee Simmons, I mean, full respect to the guy. You know, you know, I look at him as both an artist and a fisherman, and to your point, you know, he's sitting there with a brush, you know, same as me. You know, he's putting his everything into it. And to your point about, you know, doing things different, I think that's human nature. You know what I mean? If not that, you know, I've been trying to stand out by any means, but I think if you want to break out of the mold, so to speak, you have to do something different. You know, it's I have a lot of guys who have taken influence from me at this point, you know, but you know, it's I have the same hope as you to see the future progress, to see things change, to see things get better, you know.
Yeah.
Not only from a business standpoint, but from a fisherman standpoint. You know, I get to live vicariously through all these guys pulling my lures, and man, it pulls me through some of the darkest days. You know, to see that things are working, to see that at the end of the day, whether it's winning a tournament or putting a 5-pound fish on the dinner table, it means the world to me. You know, and that's always been a huge part of the fuel that drives it. You know.
Yeah, you shared that with me quite a bit over the past, and that's kind of like, for you guys who are listening, encouragement to, you know, share that stuff. Like, these guys live off of that. When they're sharing their lures with all you fishermen, like, that's all that they really want. It's not, most of you guys don't do it for the money, because you don't make a whole lot.
No.
You're doing it because you want to share the wealth and you want people to see people catch fish. And that's important. So that's an important point to note. Like, yeah, when most of you all are on social media and stuff, and you don't gotta just tag GZ, tag the lure guy, tag the people who actually really contributed to what you're doing. That means a lot to them. They're very passionate about what they do. So, and that's always been, I mean, every conversation we've had, John, I mean, that's completely evident. You're not doing this because you want to make money off of it. You're doing it because it's your passion. It's nice to make a little bit of cash on the side. But yeah. Chris, I know you had a lot of questions too. If you want to kind of move forward with kind of in that same direction you were going before. Or
yeah. Sure. Yeah. I think that was great stuff, though, Cole, that you guys kind of went into there, and I think that was a great backstory as well as kind of how GZ and John's company kind of work together to grow out and you know two people trying to doing something different, making taking a risk and risking failure to try something a little bit different. So I think that's a really good message to get out there to people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and what Cole was saying too about giving credit to the lure makers. I mean, I know everybody. Some guys are secretive, and they're like, "Well, I don't want people to know about these baits." Well, then maybe wait till the bite's over or something, and then say it. But like, yeah, give some love back to the lure makers because these guys pour their heart and soul into this. That's their baby. If you've ever created anything and had people be successful on it, that's like it's such a good feeling. Like I don't make lures, but like I might give advice or recommend something to somebody and say, hey, do it like this, and we'll do the whole thing. And I'll get a message back, or one of the videos I made because somebody watched it, they caught like the best fish of their life or something like that. And like, I can't explain how good of a feeling that is. Like, it's awesome. And so, as a lure maker, I can imagine when people are catching fish on your baits and people are having best days ever. And, and for them, it might be like a 200-pound blue marlin, but like, it's a big deal for them. And for a lure maker to share that experience and be a part of that is pretty special. So, guys out there, guys and girls, when you're having good days on a certain lure, whatever, give some love back to lure makers. Just let them know. Even shoot them a message. If you don't want to put it up on the internet or something, just shoot them a message and say, hey, thanks, I caught my best fish today on one of your lures. And trust me, they're never going to get tired of hearing that. So, yeah. Anyways, yeah, well, we'll move on. I don't know how far we kind of went, but when my internet shot out there in terms of running the baits and kind of what you want to see, but really in terms of like what someone should be trying to create this lure to do, it's do you kind of agree, John, that you want it kind of running below the surface pretty much the majority of the time, correct?
Yeah. Well, for every lure, with the exception of the flying fish,
Yeah.
There's only a couple of fish that are actually breaking water on a continual basis.
Yes.
And so to that point, yeah, match the hatch, and you're trying to replicate nature. At that point, and it kind of just, at least to me, common sense. You're trying to make an aku look like an aku,
Mm-hmm.
Unless they're feeding, they're below surface.
Yeah. And I think too, like from what I've noticed filming it, is if it's not breaking the surface and you have it down in the water, it's really clear. Like, you'd be surprised how detailed, for people that haven't filmed them or seen footage of these lures, like how far you can actually see that detail. I was surprised at that. Like, I GoPro'd it, and like to the point where you can even see like the pupil in the freaking eye. You can see the stripes. So there's, in my mind, and again, this is opinion, but there's no doubt in my mind that they see the details on this thing and they think, oh, that looks like a fish, So, and because it's not like splashing and creating a constant bubble trail, they can see it really well. So I think like, in my opinion, like those, big splashy lures and the lures that are, like tube lures or just regular lures that are pushing a lot, they always have a bubble trail, right? So they can get away with having a head that doesn't exactly look like a fish because it's primarily hidden. Again, if you ever video lures, that whole head is pretty much hidden in a veil of bubbles where you get flashes of color and you get flashes of light, and that's why I think that they do those work as well. But with something like this, it's like dog balls. I mean, you can see it. And so the details are really good. And I think that that's something also in terms of where you want to run it too, is getting it in some clean water. I did GoPro mine one time really close to the boat and I could see it well. It was down below the wash. But if you got like a trailer boat that's producing a lot, like outboard motors, they're producing a lot of whitewater and a lot of wash. I would probably suggest trying to get it out of that wash, because you want to show the details on this thing. And the fish speak. I mean, the fish speak for themselves. They hammer these things. So however you need to make your bait run to do that, I think that's probably what you want to see, is have that thing in clean water, have it below the water. It should run a little bit deeper than most bullets, and hook up, hook down. I used to run it hook up, but I found I actually think it runs a little better personally for me. That this sized one, I run it with a hook down, and then the smaller one I've been running with the hook up. Just my personal preference. I don't know if you have any say on that, John, or whatever.
You bring up again. That's a very loaded comment statement and question, and I think that the common perception over the years has been the more bubbles the better. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that all the time. To your point, I think that the fish can see the details. I think that they, science can only provide us with so much information and things like that. But it's my belief that the fish are on a different level of senses, as far as being able to see better. They're faster than we can move.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen a marlin racing at 50 miles an hour and hit the brakes at the last moment, you got to ask yourself, what happened?
Right.
What did it see or not see, or what turned it off last moment? And for them to be able to react at that speed, I think as just human beings, at times it's incomprehensible, to the point of look at their eyes, look how big their eyes are.
Yeah.
They have to be able to see that and to be able to distinguish. I mean, it's a constant dog eat dog world out there, and if they're not on their game, if they're not doing the right thing, they're fish food.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think fish in general have a higher sense of have a higher sense of senses, if that makes sense, where they can see better, they can react faster, they can do things a lot better, or not better, but it's hard sometimes to relate as people to what they're seeing, what they're thinking, if they're thinking, or is it just a reaction? All that kind of stuff. For me, a lot of it is still theory. I continue to question everything, to the point of, maybe there should be bubbles, maybe there shouldn't. I don't know. Do fish farts attract fish? Maybe. I don't think there's a necessary rule book, and I'm going to take the stance of it may change tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so it's a continual student,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you on that 100%. I mean, for years, I've always kind of been like, color it wasn't a thing for me that much, but I see a lot of video of these fish come up and I've seen it too in spreads, where they come up and they look at it, and they're hungry and they're ready and they're ready and ready, and all of a sudden last minute they're out. Why are they doing that? What's happened there that all of a sudden they change their mind? And vice versa, where they come up and they're looking, and all of a sudden for some reason they just decide now, boom.
Yeah.
And it could be a flash of color. It could be who knows, right? We're all learning all the time with that, and I don't think, and anybody that says they know exactly why is probably full of it. I don't think we know, but we know what works, right? So if you have something out there that's working and it's getting its bites, and we can make assumptions, and my assumption is that with something like this, they see it as a food, and I think that segues really good into one thing, a topic that we could talk about for hours and hours. So we'll try and make it somewhat reasonable, but reaction bites versus like a feed, right? And so you think of, like, for instance, a cat, right? You take a piece of string and you wiggle it in front of a cat. It's going to go after it. It's just going to chase it. It's got that predatory instincts to attack whatever that is, right? A piece of a ball, whatever. That's that predatory instincts being driven to make a reaction, right? It doesn't eat string for a living. It doesn't eat a furry ball for a living. It eats a mouse or whatever its forage is, right? Now, if you took a actual mouse or an actual live thing and put it out there in front of it, it's going to react a little bit differently. And so in terms of billfish, and I'm talking from billfish just because that's what my whole life I've just focused on bill fishing, right? But I'm sure tunas and stuff are similar in some regards. But I think that marlin are reacting on bites, and I think that there's bites that are reactionary bites, like a cat with a string, right? And there's bites that are, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat this, right? Same thing when you feed it a bait, right? They eat it and they swallow it, right? They don't eat a lure and swallow it. So there's differences, and it brings up an interesting point with yours, because these look like they're food that they're feeding on. Where if you take a lure and you hold it up, it doesn't really look like one. It might for a second, create the movement of a fish in a spread, right? And that movement's raising them and getting them. But I have to think that those types of big pushy lures, your regular lures and the bubble trails, are probably more reactionary bites, as opposed to like a bullet or, your baits that look, and especially when you put Flashaboo on this thing, it looks like a fish, right? That's probably more of a feed. So I don't know where to
go. Like you said, we can talk about that for days, and it's still theory, and but to your point, I do agree to a certain extent that there are different types of bites out there, and it's that I think lends to how you're rigging it as well, your traditional marlin lure is larger, longer, different hook sets and things like that. We've seen, I think both you and I have seen a lot of fish hooked in the eye.
Yeah.
It's and so it's I think that goes down to the hook set, and to your point about how the fish is actually attacking the lure. One of your earlier questions, I don't know if it was in the podcast or not, but it's do you think that they attack the eye? I do.
Yeah.
It's I think that there is a science that we don't quite necessarily understand behind that statement. Is it as simple as, is it a feeding or reactionary bite, or are there variables in between, or is there something else triggering that bite? Is it the vibration of the boat? Is it the with all the teasers in the water, are you truly replicating a fish frenzy, or is it all up in here,
right?
And so it's my take on it is match the hatch as best as possible. To your point, try and make it look like their actual food source. If it is a reactionary bite, trying to figure, I think that's, for me, I can only speak for myself, but that's one of those things that has always been a question that I kind of have conceded to will always be a question, unless we're able to get the technology to figure out what they're actually thinking and what the drive is to bite it, again, Pandora's box with that statement in question, because depending on your belief, you're going to start rigging everything a different style as well too.
Mm-hmm.
A reaction bite is not, like you said, is not the same as them just whoop, engulfing it, and so it's just I think that it's, for me, that leads into so many different areas of thought, and I kind of always go back to understanding your prey, as far as looking at billfish. They're as far as the pelagics are concerned, they're very unique in that sense that they have that bill. You guys in Kona obviously know, right? That's the target species there. And in comparison between the two islands, Oahu and Kona, even any other island, Maui, Kauai, depending on the target, the lures look wildly different. The rigs, the hook sets look wildly different. Um, for me, I think that's one of those things where it's going to be continually open ended, and it's going to continue to change. Based off of technology, off of science, off of materials. I don't know, man. That it's one of those questions and thought processes that has always kind of led me down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I want to believe in certain theories, but at the same time, you're going to hear a story tomorrow from somebody that tells you, no, they got a bite on, this way and that way. And it messes with you at times, and I think to that point, sometimes you kind of got to just stick to your guns and have confidence in what you're running, for me, at least, more importantly than the lure is the maintenance on the boat, on the reels, that kind of stuff to me is getting the bite is one thing, you know what I mean, but being able to get it, to the boat is a completely different thing as well too. So like I said, it's down the rabbit hole. It just leads to some different thought processes and things.
And I'll put that out to the audience too as well. Anybody that's on there, if you have anything to chime in on experience you've had or thoughts about the reaction bite versus feed and John's baits, go ahead and put it up there, and be good to hear some opinions. But I can say from my experience that majority of the bites that I do get on your lures is like a big hole. And I mean, even if it's 100-pound fish, it's a hole. It's different. I like a hardhead lure. When I pull a hardhead lure, there's instances where I get a lot of bites where they come up kind of behind it and they just kind of eat it, and whether that's just a different feed, I don't know, man. It's like you said, you open up Pandora's box there, and it's almost like the only thing we really know is we don't know. It's my opinions change all the time on that. But I think it's good to just know what works and then have a diversity in your spread. And that's what's really good about this is going to be different than anything else that you're going to have in the spread. So it's like, makes no sense not to at least have one in the spread or something that's very different than the rest of the stuff you have. So if you have a bunch of big pushy lures doing all this stuff, having something that's just completely different out there is a good idea. And something that is mimicking the food source is you can't really go wrong with that. And then obviously having different things out there. Sometimes they want to eat lure with a yellow head and a green skirt or whatever. It doesn't look like anything that's out there swimming in the ocean, but they want to eat it for whatever reason. So you got to just mess around and figure out what's working for you. But I think, in terms of like, we don't know exactly why, but I do know that there is the difference between having a good balanced lure spread and having a lure spread that sucks. And just putting stuff out there, you want to have a little bit of science behind what you're putting out there and creating a good little team in terms of what you're doing and a good balance. And so I think that's a question that'll be up for discussion forever, and we'll continue to look into it. But these billfish, they do use a lot of elements to feed. They detect vibration in their swim bladders, so they're detecting you before they see you. So a lot of the sight, I think, is probably closer to when they're about to make the final attack. They're using their lateral lines for spatial orientation as they come up and figure out, and they're able to identify where things are. And then when they're feeding, they're using eyesight as well as a number of senses. and into what we were saying about, do eyes matter? Gosh, I remember a while back when I was down in Joe Yee's basement with you in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory of and Joe said, well, he said, look at your lures. Tell me where most of the marks are on your lures. And whether it's true or whether it's not, my lures almost always have marks on the eyes. But at the same time, I've caught plenty of fish on lures with 0 eyes. They just have like an insert in it. So, but I have definitely noticed that there are marks a lot of times on the eyes, and that's on lures where the eyes could be in different positions too. So there's something to that for sure.
I agree. To your point earlier, I think if you ask any longtime lure maker, they'll tell you the same thing. Where and going back to my statement earlier of fish are just, they're faster than us, than we can perceive at times, to the point where they have the ability to actually target that small little dot and get it on the mark every single time. Right. That's part of how, to your comment of how they're feeding. They have different ways of feeding. They're not going to attack the tunas the same way they attack the mahis. You see them feeding in different ways, different forms and stuff like that. But to your point, one of the easiest ways, as far as, look at all the small little sailfish and the stripies. What we can see on video is constantly, right, they're whacking the heads, right, and it makes sense. Take out the head, you take out the fish.
Yeah.
Right. And at that point, it becomes easy prey, and so that comment again. I constantly live in that rabbit hole where it's that thought process of trying to look at it from a different light and a different things of, what does that mean as far as hook? How do you rig your hooks? Should you be rigging it a different way? Is there a different way to catch them? And so
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, when you think in terms of how they eat something, and this can be learned from giving them dead baits and stuff like that, is that they're going to try and get that head first and grab a hold of it. Usually, obviously there's times where they just blow up on something, but when they actually are ready to swallow something, it's almost like a pelican. They turn it around. They're not going to eat a fish back. They're not going to want to eat a fish backwards, because when you think, if you took your hand and you went up an aku or a fish like this, there's so much stuff that's going to get caught in your hand. The fins are going to come out. The dorsal is going to come out. There's spines. But if you come head first, it's an easy slide bullet, right? And the other thought too is, fish can't go backwards. So when you're thinking about an animal feeding on something, when they eat it like this, that fish can't swim backwards and get away. It only goes forward. And so these are all things to kind of keep in the back of your head in terms of how they might be feeding or what they want to do. And obviously there's times where that just goes out the window, where they just blow up on something or they eat it from the tail or something. But generally when they're going to swallow something, I think they want to grab a hold of that head and turn it around and get it down. How it works with lures, I don't know. And I mean, you can go down the whole rabbit hole of, well, what if we just started making these lures really soft? And would they react differently? Would it make a difference, right? You can put a rubber chugger head on a aku or a bait, and they'll swallow that thing with the chugger head on it, because it's soft and they don't feel the difference. So, gosh, it's an interesting, dilemma, I guess, when you think about, and it's something that I hope we continue to question and talk about, and people continue to, and think outside the box, because there's a better way for us to be doing this. This isn't where we're at right now. There's no, like, we're in a position where every marlin you're going to catch, I don't care who you are. It's just not where you're at. It's just how it is. Right. But the progression can go by bringing up these questions and thinking about, okay, how can we do better? How can we do better? How can we do better? So, yeah, I think it's stuff to think about. It definitely is, and I would think the eye's got to make a difference. You take out the eye of your prey, it's very easy to eat that thing. It's like a wahoo taking off the tail. How many times have they done that? They take off the tail. Maybe you're pulling a ballyhoo or something. They take off the tail. You free spool it back. You hook that thing. They're taking out the propulsion system of it. Marlin can't really take out the propulsion system of something, but if they can take out its eye and its vision and injure it, yeah. And I think that big lures get a lot more wax, a lot more bill wax, and you get a lot poorer hookup rate. I never bought into the theory of a heavy lure is why you don't catch too many fish on them. I don't know if that's so much the case as it's just how they feed on that heavy lure. Because I don't think that matters that much. And in some regards, it may help that lure with a little weight in the background because it keeps tight when that thing's running around and that lure's back there. But I think they feed differently on a bigger lure because for them, they're thinking, okay, this isn't just an easy thing. I'm going to kind of hurt this thing before I eat it or whatever. But again, all assumptions. I have very little. I have just proof from what I've seen, but whether there's truth to it, I don't know.
Well, I agree. I mean, it's to your point. It's spending time out on the water. It's even watching National Geographic, and you see it from a different angle. To your comment of, I think they do feed differently on different species. It's case in point, going back to the marlin thing. I mean, that bill right there is for them, it's a double-edged sword, no pun intended,
Yeah.
but it's if you understand, going back to like understanding your prey, if you understand the marlin, you understand, it's not hard to, it's hard. It's very hard to hook them in the bill, just being what the material is, how hard it is, all that kind of stuff. Right. To that point of even looking at, understanding the texture of the bill itself. You have guys in the Philippines catching marlin without hooks, and so it's I think the better you can understand, your prey, going back to your point of being out there on the water, seeing them feed, keeping track of your bites, how the thing bit, where the thing bit, where was that hook, where did that hook end up landing, what kind of rig was it, all that kind of stuff. I think there is a science to that. I don't think we fully truly understand the science, but I think there is a science to that.
Yeah, there is. And I look forward to, that over time, the people starting to learn a bit more. And as we just kind of grow and start to figure it out and maybe make some changes in how we rig things and do stuff over time to just, to catch more. So, but those are all things to keep in mind for everybody else that's out there and think about when you have your lures out there and fish feeding. And if you start losing a lot of fish, you start missing a lot of fish, it may not always be your hook rig. It may be the bite that you're enticing from that fish. And the position where the lure is. There's a lot of elements into it other than just, I need to change my hook. So yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Now we're a couple more things we'll talk about, but we did have a couple questions jump up there, or that we'll just jump on here and go through since they put those on. So someone's asking here, Jason, is lure 2 that you would suggest for someone starting out trolling in Hawaii? And then why those choices? He's saying a small boat, like a 17-foot whaler. So I guess he didn't really quite say what he wants to fish for, but I guess let's assume he's marlin fishing, or we'll do a bit of Ono and mahi. Here we go. Thanks, Jason. Ono and mahi. I'm gonna leave that ball in John's court because he's a hell of a lot better at that than me. What do you think, John? What would you suggest?
Something on the smaller side, 5 to 9 inch. what I like to run, as far as for mahi, my favorites have been the 7-inch ballyhoo and the 7-inch malolo, uh, tiny little flying fish. Uh, I think loaded question again, but I think it's just being in the right area, has a lot to do with it. Um, for those two particular fish, the ono, I would tend to go for a heavier lure, more like the 9-inch malolo, a little bit heavier, runs a little bit deeper per se. But they'll bite in any position. It's just for those ones, I think sometimes during the years and depending where you're fishing, I think to a certain extent color can make a difference. And it's just kind of understanding the cycles of or trying to understand the cycles of the bait fishes that are coming through, whether it's the mackerel, the ballyhoos, even the shrimps, uh, all that kind of stuff. You know, uh, I wish I had a guarantee answer for that. But I think anything on the smaller side per se, you're targeting smaller fish. You know, so 7, 9 inch, even the 5 inches.
Okay. And Flashaboo, rubber skirt. What do you?
Yes, 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 yeah, yes to all, in the sense that I think rubber works, flashable works, even the hybrids work.
Yeah.
Putting a little bit of flashable on the rubber.
Yeah. Good
Um,
tip on that.
that's been a new thing. Flashable has been around for decades. And it's just
Oh, yeah.
it's come full circle. It's for decades people forgot about it, and it's made its way back, and now it's become a standard again, and it's kind of they all work.
Yeah.
I think it goes back down to to having confidence in your baits.
Yes.
And just kind of sometimes just leave it be. Sometimes there's you need to adjust, and you can micro adjust. I'm guilty of it myself, as far as overthinking things. What I mean, I think you can easily overthink it and question it and pull the lure too early, you know, or get caught up too much in thinking, no, it needs to be in this position or that position, or it's again, I apologize for not being able to give a concise answer, but it's a loaded question, and it's just ask 100 different guys, you're going to get 100 different answers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of like the Flashaboo and the rubber skirt, the difference is, one thing to think about too is if you're going to run double hooks, which a lot of times on meat fish you may want to run double hooks, especially if there's some tunas around, because they do kind of hit that head. They do short, it's more of a short bite. If you run a single hook far back in the skirt, you miss. Well, I miss a lot of tunas because of that. So if you are thinking about running double hooks, you're probably going to have to stick with a rubber skirt as opposed to the flash, because you're going to get more tangles with the flash and double hook rigs. And also with Ono, the other side too is with Onos, if you're specifically targeting Onos, you're going to be able to catch more fish with one set of skirts if you're using flash boot than if you're using rubber. Using a rubber skirt, sometimes you usually that first Ono bite is done with the skirt. So those are a couple things to keep in mind. How you want to rig them, and what you would do there. And then in terms of, you're saying you're in a smaller 17-foot whaler, keep in mind what we're saying about the bubbles, and trying to get a bait in some cleaner water. And you may want to try a bird too with a little lure behind it, as well. Or the big flying fish you have with the wings it's kind of like a bird. So something like that creates a little bit of action out the back. Just about every skiff here in Kona, I mean, pretty much every skiff I see trolling always has a bird way out the back with a little lure behind it. So if that gives you any help with that. Okay, cool. Niiyama's everywhere in Tahiti because of GZ. That's great. Good to hear that. I know that the boys in Tahiti have been doing awesome on those things. Let's see what else. Ballyhoo's on them. Oh boy.
I'm not gonna lie, we get this question on your lures, John, almost more than any other lure. So so it's a good question to answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess cat's out of the bag. For years from the beginning, we've been, we've been experimenting with that, and yes, it does work. Um, the caveat to that is, for the majority of the time, you're stuck with a single hook rig with that. It's when you look at the bait itself, I'm assuming they're referring to running a ballyhoo under the skirts,
yeah,
and things like that. Initially, when you look at it, it's the size profile doesn't match the true to life size of the actual fish. But what I think the reason why it's working and is due to the fact that it's number one, it looks natural, it has the right color. Number two, just that little added extra, that can help entice the bite. I think back to our earlier conversation, I think the more realistic you can get it in all regards, you're giving yourself a better chance, of convincing the fish that this is something that it wants to eat.
Yeah. And for people that are pulling in fisheries that are pulling ballyhoos for years, they've put Islanders or Joe Shoots or whatever over the top of a ballyhoo. And that's when you think about, your baits or a smaller size one. It's not all that much different, except it looks a lot more lifelike. But, if you're fishing tournaments, keep in mind the circle hook thing with a natural bait. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of trolling. But if you're catching fish, makes sense to put one in there. So yeah, that's probably a really good question. Well, Cole, are there any questions or anything you want to dive into? You deal with a lot of customers who are getting these baits, and if there's other questions that always arise or anything you want to kind of bring up. Now we got John on here.
I'm just trying to think. We addressed a lot of them, to be honest. The flash and boo versus rubber skirt is a great question that a lot of people ask. And we've just come to the point where so many people just like the look of flash boo. We primarily skirt with that when it comes to almost any bullet, but we do some rubber skirting. It's not to say that we don't think it's going to work. It's just like that's just sort of what catches the attention of the fishermen, and they do work. So and I would say, Chris, you could speak on that, but I mean, it does seem that it does have an impact on the bite a little bit, in a positive fashion. So I'm just trying to think of any additional questions that we haven't addressed. I mean, I know questions that I always want to know what's next.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's just, I mean, I'm just going to speak I'm not going to speak too candidly, but any one of you, if you want to know one thing about John, he's got like a million things that he's working on at one time, or that he has worked on. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say all the things I've seen with my own eyes, but I mean, John, you're a very creative man. You maybe don't want to speak and answer that question, but that's usually the question that I always have is like, oh, what's next, John? What's going on?
Well, first off, trying to fulfill previous orders, number one, that's always been an issue. Number two, I don't know what the future brings. To your point, I have multiple different things I want to release. Certain things are being fine-tuned at the moment. Certain things are kind of still on the drawing board. Learning from hiccups and past failures and things of that nature. Just trying to learn from those mistakes to try and make sure that if and when, or not if, but when new products are released, they're done so to the point where I can hopefully make more than a few dozen people happy. Doing so in quantity has always been my bane. Two hands. So it's just trying to balance everything else, the quality and the quantity, of everything. But no, yeah, there's to your question, there's a bunch of stuff in the works. When? Uh, I don't know
To be
yet.
determined.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I saw one of your shrimp lures that you had teased a while back, going out there, and it's just an example of, man, like the thing that I'm excited about, and I mean, even both our companies, who knows what's going to happen? We kind of know what direction we're going, and you probably have a good idea of what direction you want to go with your company. But I will say one thing is, like, just, there's more to come with John. That's for sure down the road. The good thing is with you is you've created a massive demand for what little products you have released because they work really well. And so it's, I don't know. There's just, like I said, I'm excited to see what's coming, but at the same time, like, if you've already created that much demand with this few products, I mean, like, dude, you got a future ahead of you, man. Whatever you want to do is it's up to you, buddy.
Oh, well, sorry not to interrupt, but to that comment, it's I will continually thank everybody else. My success has been hinged on everybody else, that supported through the years. It's without fishermen out there pulling it doesn't work. It's just a nice mantelpiece, and so it's just like I said earlier, it's in hearing the feedback, both positive and negative. That's helped me get to where we are, and hopefully continue to head on that same trend. Is at the end of the day, yeah, I like money, but I'm not chasing money with this thing. It means it's from a fisherman's perspective, it means the world to see somebody else catch on it, and whether it's a tournament or whether it's just putting food on the table. To me, it's kind of one and the same thing. I get the same warm fuzzy feeling, and so it's just I look forward to the future. I think it's going to be interesting to say the least, but at the same time, continually give thanks to everybody that's helped me on this journey.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right
That's
on,
great, man. One more thing I think maybe we'll touch on real here, and then we're going to roll. But John's a big fisherman himself. He fishes a lot back home. If you're going out to fish and you're using your lures, what are you putting out there? What's your spread? You're heading out there.
Riggers, I'll do a 9 and a 12 aku, either or side. Send down the center. I've been running the flying fish with wings with a trailer on the back. Close up, I'll tag down a 12-inch aku as well too, and I'll usually leave the other corner either short or long to kind of play with new stuff. So that one's kind of always being changed, but it's in a moment's notice. We'll come up on the aku school, and everything comes in, everything gets changed out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Cool.
Depending where we're fishing, when we're fishing during ahi season, everything is in the 9+ range. If we're fishing, in the shallows, 40 fathoms off the ledge, I'm running ballyhoos, I'm running the smaller malolos, things like that. The Flashaboo has been awesome, to say the least. But at the same time, at least from my perspective, I'm still getting an even bite on the rubber versus Flashaboo.
There you are. Okay.
Where I see some difference is in the aquapiles, the smaller fish. They'll sometimes I think that little bit of extra, flash helps depending on what they're feeding on, of course. But yeah, I kind of just trying to, as best as possible, try and match the hatch to the seasons. What we know is, when there are a lot of Opelu, or we're marking the balls of baits and stuff like that. We're trying to guess which bait that is down there they're feeding on, or if we're lucky enough to catch something, gut it or shove the hose down the throat and make them see what they've been feeding on. And then from that point, adjust, try again, match the hatch.
Yeah, smart. Yeah, awesome. Really good insight from this whole thing. We're definitely going to need to do a couple more of these with you and dive into some stuff. It's really fun talking with you about fishing. We'll probably let you go here, man. We've done an hour and a half here pretty much and run through. But what anything else you want to kind of finish off with, or anything you want to say?
No, thank you and aloha to everybody. It's again, it's continued thanks. It's your success is my success, and it's I hope to be able to continue to do this to the day I die, and it's like I said, it's been a wild journey, and it's been a fun wild journey, and so it's riding the ups and downs, and it's who knows what tomorrow will bring.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, thank you, man. Thank you. That's to everybody, to all the other lure makers, to all the guys I collaborate with, to all the captains, to all the to all the deckhands, everybody. It's nothing but thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. And thank you so much, man, for doing this with us, and thanks for thinking outside the box and coming up with something that is way different and helping us all catch a lot of fish. And I look forward to all the other things coming, because I know they are. I know there's things. I know there's stuff going on. Yeah. I look forward to it, man. It's fun. So glad we're working together. And yeah, we'll do this again, dude. That was awesome. Cole, anything else?
That's it. No, I just appreciate it, John. Like I was saying earlier, I was going to end with that, what I was talking about earlier, but I mean, we wouldn't be here. And I'm not saying this. I mean, we all know that this is a labor of love for you. You're not out here trying to pump a bunch of numbers. I'm not saying this to try and get more product from you or anything like that. Like, you seriously, we would not be where we are if it wasn't for your help. And I've always appreciated that about you. It's just, you legitimately want people to be better and to succeed. And you've been a good friend from that standpoint. And I appreciate that, man.
No, like I've always said, two-way street, man. Two-way street. It's feelings the same here.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll be all fishing together soon.
Yeah, let's do that, guys. Let's
go out
and do some fishing. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, John. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, guys.
Guys, see ya.
All right, take care.